All right, Ed, welcome to the 8th Lane podcast.
Thank you. Excited to be here. Yeah.
I'm so excited to have you. For our guests that don't recognize you or don't know who you are, do you want to give a little introduction to who you are?
I can't believe any guest would not recognize me after the hard work of your husband for the last 6-8 weeks. Well, no, 16 weeks, whatever.
4 months.
Yes, 4 months of our life. He's been covering it with Clayton's docu-series on his build for the Paris Marathon. Yeah, but my name is Ed Eyestone. I'm the head track and field coach and men's cross-country coach at BYU. I've been there for the last 24, 25-ish years. Prior to that, I was a professional runner for about 15 years. Made 2 Olympic teams and had some great experiences in that. And then for the last, like I say, 25 years, been a head coach at BYU.
Cool. Yeah, you're like a legend in this space. And I'm excited to pick your brain about a lot of different things. But I do want to start with kind of a nickname that I've heard circulate about you, Easy E. I think it maybe describes your coaching style a little bit. Where did that come from?
Easy E. Well, so it's not a reference to my rapping abilities or skills. Yeah, I think Easy E just came about as working with guys for a couple of decades and them realizing that there's different schools of coaching out there for sure, and there's different personality types in the coaching world, and a lot of success along the continuum of coach between the dictatorial and the laissez-faire. I'd like to think I'm somewhere in the middle in terms of just being, I guess Easy E might indicate that I'm easygoing. I can work with you. I'm not going to get really bent out of shape when things don't go our way. But really, I'm as competitive as anybody who has worked with me or has seen my athletes would recognize that it's not that I don't care. It's just that I know that our pursuit of being an endurance athlete is difficult enough without having some tyrannical dictator over you, whipping you every time things don't go right. I think you need to have a support. I think you need to have in a coach someone you can talk to. It helps if someone that is working with you has been there, so he kind of gets it, and maybe that leads itself to some of my Easy E, having kind of walked the walk in at least in some arenas in terms of elite competition. I kind of know the stresses that these athletes are feeling, and I know how important it is to them. And so the last thing I want to do is add to the stress of what it is to be competitive on a either national or world level. And I guess that's where some of my Easy E comes from. I want to be someone that can work with an athlete and be very approachable, walk through and talk through the training with them so that they have an understanding of it. It's certainly not my way or the highway type of thing, but I think over time people recognize that I've been able to have great success both as an athlete and as a coach, and with that consistent degree of pretty good success over various 30 plus years, 40 plus years if you count my athletic career, that leads itself to some gravitas or some amount of expertise, I guess, through the consistency and through the time that I've been doing this. And so I think over time people recognize that my style is one that hopefully they'll be comfortable with. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to push them to their limits, but I'm also conscious, particularly over the last 20 plus years, that an important element in coaching and in training is recovery. And that's why, my training system generally incorporates 1 day out of 7 as a complete off day, as a recovery day. And I think that's something that sometimes coaches and athletes are so focused on reaching their potential, they just don't want to miss anything in trying not to miss anything, they really miss one of the most important components, and that is recovery.
This episode is brought to you by Mercedes-Benz Van Center Warner, Utah's largest selection of recreational and commercial vans for all purposes, new, pre-owned, and rentals. They are passionate about supporting the running and active community in Utah. Check them out at mbvancenterwarner.com. Just along those lines, how do you know when to push your athletes? Because my only real experience with your coaching is watching that series on Clayton Young, and then hearing from other athletes. I listened to quite a few podcasts where a lot of your athletes spoke of your coaching style and kind of what it was able to pull out of them. So I've heard you push, and I've heard you tell people to push, but when do you do that?
Well, and it was interesting, probably following the docu-series, those that were following it, where they saw Conner Mantz, who was someone that the last thing I needed to do is push him, because he's always finding a way to take the times that he's supposed to hit for his intervals or for his tempo runs or predicted marathon pace runs, and he'll generally push that envelope to maybe a little more extreme than you would like. And then you have Clayton, who is probably more apt to follow the times that have been given him, and so there's an interesting push and pull on that. I think at the end of the day, the athletes are wanting to get the best out of their training. They recognize that given these workouts that we're doing, it requires them to push themselves to a certain limit. I'm there to encourage them as they do. Often I'll set a governor of, okay, let's not go any faster than this, but if you're feeling fine, you can take it up to that level. And then hopefully as we progress over time, they can see those times getting a little bit faster and faster as they go. But that's not even a necessary component. Oftentimes, that's something you need to teach your athletes, that getting better doesn't necessarily mean that each time you do a certain workout, you're going faster on that. Sometimes it means you're hitting right at that same spot, and it's the consistency over time, not the improvement over each time you do a specific workout, that ultimately yields the biggest gains.
And I guess I'm just kind of thinking of this now, but by the time you get athletes, I mean, BYU's program is amazing. And so you're really taking athletes who are already really good and making them better. So maybe there isn't always a need to push these boys because they know how to push already, maybe.
Yeah, well, but by the time they get to BYU, we are very fortunate that we're able to get the cream of the crop, really. Not necessarily. I mean, I think if you look at other top four programs, historic top four, and we'll just keep it the discussion to maybe cross country. I don't know that we get the same level of talent as some of the traditional top four programs, but I think we get very, very good talent, and great coaching begins and ends with getting the right talent to begin with. The old adage, you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ears, applies to running as well. And I think we take pride in the fact that we've developed some people that were not on the radar necessarily, but I think they at least had the makings of that silk purse when we brought them into BYU. I mean, I've received a lot of comments from coaches saying, "Wow, Kenneth Rooks was a 9:20 2-miler or 3,200 runner and a 411 maybe a miler. 411 is pretty solid for sure. 920 not as competitive really, and part of that was I just don't think he had developed that side and had opportunities to race. Maybe his senior year, I think he dinged up a little bit. But yeah, we get very, very good athletes to begin with. Then we put them in a system where they have a lot of support, whether they you don't feel maybe the extra stress that might come from a different type of coaching style, but certainly get in a system where with the consistent work at the end of the trail, hopefully they're reaching their full potential, which in Kenneth's Case was a silver medal in the Olympics with Conner and Clayton, a top 10 performance, 8th and 9th. And I'm not saying that that's their limit, but it was a good day for them both, for all three of them, I felt like, at the Olympics. And now we're recalibrating and going forward. We're going to enjoy and celebrate what we experienced for a while, because already after the games, that very night, I think people were asking about, well, can Kenneth get the gold? Of course he can get the gold. He was .4 off of the gold when he got the silver, but we're going to celebrate that for a while before we get too concerned about 2028.
Yeah, 4 years.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's very cool. I listened to a devotional that you did, I think in like 2015 or something. BYU does these.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, BYU does like weekly devotionals, and one year Ed spoke at a devotional. And you were speaking about running, and one thing you said was it's important to lead by example and to coach by example. And from what I can gather, that's like a lot of what you do with your boys. What like attributes or characteristics have you had to specifically focus on to improve your coaching to lead by example?
Well, yeah, I mean, like I say, having been a professional runner for, probably over 15 years, I was almost 40 by the time I finally hung it up and had to look for a real job. That and the experiences that I had in multiple world championships, world cross country championships, world track and field championships, Olympic games, and then just running the road circuit and big time marathons. I think you pick up, hopefully you're not doing all this with your eyes closed. You're picking up things, you're seeing trends. You're for a time, before my third or fourth Olympic trials, I went down to Mexico and actually trained with a really good group of Mexican national runners who were some of the top runners of that era. Germán Silva, who was the first Mexican to win the New York City Marathon, and I was good friends with him and went down there and just spent a couple months prior to the Olympic trials in 1996. So all along, I'm kind of taking notes and going, picking things and workouts that I'm seeing that are going to be useful for my own training, since I was kind of self-coached for the last 10 plus years of my career. And, kind of filing them away, at least in my brain, of, okay, ultimately, if I do get into coaching, these are going to be some of the concepts that I'm sharing, and usually any nuggets that I share, I have I've stolen from, plagiarized from someone else. I had a 2.5 years where I was coaching at Weber State when I first got my foot in the door of coaching on the college side, and I was still running professionally, but I was coaching there, and there was a man by the name of Chick Hislop who really was kind of the steeplechase guru, and so I watched what he did. I saw the drills and whatnot that he was doing, and some of the workouts that he was doing, and went, okay, I can take that stuff, I can implement that when given a chance, and so had a lot of great mentors. In fact, I think the devotional you saw was probably choosing worthy mentors, I think was the title of it. And so I think there's a lot of people in the running community certainly that can be positive mentors, as well as just life mentors, and part of that is just surrounding yourself with greatness, surrounding yourself with really good people, and learning as much as you can from them.
Yeah, and that's something I've heard your athletes emphasize a lot in like media, is like it is not so much about running as it is like being a good person and like becoming a good runner. And that's also being a good person.
Yeah, you would hope that would apply in all aspects and all careers of life, that we can do this and not be a jerk. Sometimes it makes better media if we do have a good guy and a bad guy, and all those things come together. And there probably needs to be more of that to get all the eyeballs on our sport. That we know how wonderful this sport is. But by and large, the people who are doing our events, and by our events, we're talking probably specifically the middle distance and distance events, know that they are working really hard. They're not getting a lot of financial reward out of the deal. And so they have to be pretty self-motivated. They have to be pretty focused. And the vast majority are not prima donnas. They don't experience the same level of entitlement that sometimes you experience in other sports, and I think that ultimately is a good thing for them, and if they can channel that, then hopefully they can be very successful.
For the purpose of this next little discussion, I want to kind of focus in on the 5 athletes that went to Paris this year.
Yeah.
I'm including Rory, even though
Okay.
you're not coaching him anymore.
Yeah,
But
yeah, include Rory. Rory's awesome.
because you have 2 experiences in the Olympics, did you see any parallels between any of those athletes? Like, first of all, which one seems most like you, or do any of them seem like you?
Who's the most like me? There are probably aspects of each of them that are similar to me, I would guess. Conner reminds me of myself in a lot of ways, just in terms that he loves to race. He would race every weekend if given the opportunity. He has a really good range that he's very competitive in, from 1,500 meters. Actually, you can run some pretty, if not world class, and certainly national class times in 1,500 meters. And obviously, the longer he goes, the stronger he can be. And he was a very, very good cross country runner. I feel like as an athlete, that was probably my best sport was cross country. I was 6th at the World Cross Country Championships when I was in my mid-20s, and then as a U20 athlete, under 20, I was 3rd at the World Cross Country Championships in my first international travel. And so I really love that about him. I see some aspects of that in terms of just pushing himself, and I didn't ever feel really totally secure about my finishing kick. And I think Conner, in the back of his mind, one reason why he loves to just grind is because although he's very capable of running fast, he's run fast 1500s, but he likes to kind of punish it before it comes right down to the end. Although he's got some pretty good speed at the end.
Yeah, he has some pretty crazy finishes that are fun to watch.
Yeah, he does. He does, for sure. And so there's kind of that aspect of him that kind of reminds me. Rory, there are probably aspects of Rory that also, because I could be a bit of a. Now, if I say this, then he'll think that I'm saying this about him. But I was going to say I could be a bit of a punk sometimes, but that doesn't mean that Rory was a punk. It just means that he could have a little bit of a attitude, and I probably had more attitude than I should have at times. And Rory's, he's not a punk. He can just be very competitive, and so there's probably that aspect. And I'm sure with Clayton and Kenneth, I'd like to think that at times I had kind of the same sort of spiritual center that Kenneth has, although I don't know that I've ever reached that place that he has, and Clayton's kind of in that same area. Clayton, I guess I see the similarity in his caring nature of his kids, and Rory's a lot. I guess both Rory and Clayton remind me of that a lot, because Rory's not afraid to kind of travel with his kids, even to big meets, and I sometimes would do that at Olympic trials and whatnot. And
how old were your kids when you went to the Olympics for the first time?
Well, first time, for my first games, Erica was just an infant, and then my next time we had we had 2 kids at the time, and Andrea came with Lynn when she was just a toddler to the Olympic trials, and so
kind of the same ages.
Yeah. So I think I like that aspect of both Rory and Clayton in terms of being good, solid family men, and ones that involve their spouse and their family in that, and along for the ride, and along for the adventure, and along for allowing them to reach their full potential. Obviously, Ashley and Rory's wife have both been very instrumental in helping them and being there to both nutritionally make sure they made it, and also just allowing them to get the rest that they need. Being a distance runner, elite class, national class, world class distance runner can be a very hedonistic pursuit. It's all about yourself in some regards, in terms of I got to get the sleep, I got to get the right nutrition, I got to get my afternoon nap in on top of everything else. So it really takes a partner that's very sympathetic to that, and supportive of that. And I think I see with all 5 of these young men now, because they're all married at this point, yes, that they have chosen partners that are going to do that, and I think that's one reason why they've been successful.
Mm. And your wife, how old were you when you married her?
We were 25, 26, so for this neck of the woods, it's a little bit getting older, but
BYU.
for us it was just fine. It was the perfect date for perfect age. We were both in grad school at the time. My wife was finishing her PhD in clinical psychology, and I was getting a master's degree in exercise science. So it was good timing, and it was nice because we'd had a chance to kind of do some things, as individually before we made that commitment.
Mm-hmm. Just kind of seeing those parallels between you and your athletes, was there anything we all kind of saw your excitement when your boys made the Olympic team.
Yeah, for sure.
Was there anything you specifically told them? Was there any advice that you gave them that you remembered from being in the Olympics, or was it just kind of that same?
Are we talking the trials, or are we talking the games? Or because
let's say the games.
Yeah, so the games, well, I'll start with the trials, because the trials was obviously the first big major step, and having gone through it a couple times myself, I think all told I went to, 8 or 9 trials, if you count the ones that I didn't do well in. I think 1, 2, 3, I guess just 3 Olympic trials in the marathon, and then 1, 2, I guess only 2 more in the track side of things. No, 3 on the track. Take that back. I think it was two tracks and 3 marathon trials, but I think I had qualified for 2 or 3 others that because I had made the marathon team, I passed on the track or whatever. And so I think first and foremost, having been through that trial, and knowing the pressure that is kind of heaped on you by friend, and lovingly so, by friends and family, in their desire to, wish you luck and also want you to have that experience, because they know that the Olympics is kind of the ultimate dream. There is just a lot of pressure that goes through that. And so my main focus with these guys is, let's take that stress off as much as possible. Let's realize that we are capable of doing this. We've run the times necessary to do it. Your training is lining up for it to happen. And rather than focus on the end result, let's make it more of a process sort of thing, so that as you go into the Olympic trials, it's just like what happened at Chicago. What did we do at Chicago? We just got really fit. We had to build an excellent 16-week build going into Chicago. We stayed healthy during that time. We executed. We ran our specific paces, and then at the end result was, yes, we ran the time, the sub 2:08:10, which was necessary to get the Olympic standard, and then we had to kind of repeat that going into the Olympic trials, or their times would have been taken by 2 other runners. So for them to pull that off, both at Chicago and then to defend the marks, to defend essentially those 2 tickets that they had earned for the games, and to finish first and second again at the Olympic trials.
Which was like 3 months later.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, which was a quick turnaround. Wasn't your typical 16-week build, and by the time each of them got through their little hiccups, anytime you run a big marathon, it puts the body to a lot of stress. And so by the time they got back and were training hard, and particularly in Mantz's case, I think it was more like a 8-week build from the time that he was, totally healthy to run again. And then once they did it at the trials, then to have to turn it around again to do it again. And the fact that there were 2 athletes that went 3 for 3 in terms of what they had to do is just a testament to what great athletes they are, because I think the mark of a great athlete isn't necessarily that they're one and done. I think it's the consistency that they're able to do that over time, and the fact that they were able to put those 3 marathons together and execute very well means that they were great athletes, but also I think it means that I didn't screw them up too badly either. There was something to be said about the program that they followed that got them through at the end of the day. So that was great. And then in terms of the other athletes, kind of the same thing applies. Ryan Hall was taking care of Rory's prep, and I think he did an excellent job for him to be able to go to, I think it was Sevilla or Valencia, one of the 2 Spain marathons, to run that fast, qualifying and get his spot on the Canadian Olympic team. And then in terms of James Corrigan and Kenneth Rooks, they were 2 different cases. Yes, they both qualified in the steeplechase, but unlike Mantz and Clayton, who essentially did every workout together during that almost year-long process, Kenneth Rooks and James Corrigan were on different schedules, and with the James following kind of the NCAA schedule, and then Kenneth Rooks following his own Olympic prep schedule. James's training was kind of keyed for the NCAA end of year, the Big 12 championship, the regional meet, and then the NCAAs, and then whatever he could do after that fact, good on you, let's go to the Olympic trials and get some experience. Whereas Kenneth Rooks was focused more on being ready for the Olympic trials and then being ready for the Olympic Games. So kind of on different schedules, yet because of Kenneth had a couple small injuries that caused us to have to pause things for a week here, half a week there, a week there. Ultimately, towards the end of the year, they finally were able to get into some workouts together. But it really wasn't until probably a couple weeks before the Olympic trials, after James had gone through the NCAAs and done very well, won the Big 12, looked great at regionals, looked awesome in the first round of the NCAAs, and then came up a little dry for the final of the NCAAs and finished at 9th place in the NCAAs. Yet a couple weeks later, he and Kenneth were able to get some good workouts together, and I think that was what he needed for his confidence. And I think it also worked well for Kenneth's confidence that, he had someone pushing him in workouts again, and at that point he was healthy. And so when we went to the Olympic trials for the track trials, I was optimistic that Kenneth would win. He looked good enough, and he'd shown in other races that he was going to do just fine as long as he stayed on his feet. And in Kenneth's case, maybe not. He didn't even have to stay on his feet as we've seen before. Seriously. And in James's case, I thought, okay, he's going to make the final for sure, and let's see how many of these pros he can take off in the finals. As it turned out, Kenneth, was extremely solid, moved probably a little earlier than I would have expected at the Olympic trials, but powered his way to a comfortable win. And then James was the one who kind of stole his thunder by being the college guy who was in 7th or 8th place at the Bell Lap and was able to pass 4 or 5 guys to get his spot. So that was kind of exciting. And in some ways, and then he had to go chase a mark, and a week later or 6 days later to secure that, or Jaeger would have ended up with the 3rd spot. And so by the time he pulled off that hat trick of not only getting 3rd place, but then going to Philly, getting the Olympic standard and actually running faster than Kenneth ever had in the process.
Stop.
Then
That's crazy.
suddenly Kenneth was like, well, what about me? No, he didn't ever say that, but I kind of felt that way about him. And in the process, he broke Kenneth's school record, no less.
Oh my God. I had no idea he broke Kenneth's school
he
record.
got school record. Well, he was aware of it, and Kenneth's cute mom was also aware of it, and felt kind of sad that her son, who, it took Kenneth, it took someone 40 years ish to break Henry Marsh's school record in the steeplechase, and then Kenneth Rooks' school record lasted for less than a year when James came around and took it from him. But I think in some ways that when James ran the 8:13 in Philly to finalize his ticket to Paris, then I think we all knew, wait a minute, Kenneth is definitely, at least right now, more mature, more experienced, and probably a little stronger runner than James is. James can run 8:13, essentially being rapid to that. Then I think Kenneth has a really good shot of running 8:06 or faster, and that's ended up what he did, and that's what kind of shocked the world, the running world anyway, at least those who didn't know Kenneth, in Paris when he secured the silver.
Yeah, that was such a cool race to watch. And your reaction videos, like, there was a ton of them circulating, but those were also so fun to watch.
That's awesome.
Just as the coach.
Yeah, coaches get excited, and certainly at the trials, it was all about, we were expecting Kenneth to make it, and I was kind of watching and tracking and making sure that the guys didn't close down on him. Once I did, I went, okay, let's see how James is doing. And then once we saw James kind of working his way through on that last lap, that's when I was kind of like, look at James, look at James, look at James. And that was cool. And then kind of a similar sort of thing, in the Olympic final, we had a specific plan going into that Olympic final. We knew that the Ethiopians were probably going to do team tactics against El Bakkali. El Bakkali had won 13 world finals between Olympics, World Championships, and other major events, 13 in a row. So we knew that El Bakkali, even though he had been a little injured throughout the course of the season, would probably be the guy to beat. The Ethiopians also realized that, and they kind of employed some team tactics. And going into it, I had just told Kenneth, hey, you've got the world record holder versus the in Girma versus the perennial world international champion in El Bakkali. If I'm Team Ethiopia, I'm finding a way to pace that race at such a pace that they'll just be able to run the legs off of El Bakkali. So it didn't come as a surprise when the race went out on about 8 flat pace. And as Kenneth and I had counseled together before, we had said, okay, well, let's run this. Let's not go any faster than maybe 8:04, 8:05 pace. If they run at 64s, I think that's 8 flat pace. That might be a little strong, but 8:05 we're probably good with. I think that's 8:06, 8:07. So somewhere between there. If it's high 64s, then that's probably okay. If it's low 65s, that's definitely okay, but try not to go any faster than that. And so when you watch that race back, play that back, you'll see that Kenneth, gets out well and then kind of makes a conscious decision. Okay, I'm going to hit my 64s and 65s because these guys are running maybe 63s and 64s early on. And that takes a lot of discipline,
Totally.
for an athlete. When you are used to being very competitive, and you see there were 16 guys in that final, and you look around and you're in 15th or 16th place for those first 3 or 4 laps, that takes a lot of discipline on your part, not to just go for it, especially when the Olympic Games. But I like, obviously, he is a very well-disciplined runner. He knows that, particularly in the steeplechase, you can get in trouble if you go out harder than what your fitness might deliver, and then fortunately, with about 3 laps to go, I think the Ethiopians who were leading it and trying to get the pace fast enough that they'd pull away from El Bakkali, I think they realized, hey, this is the Olympic Games. I don't necessarily want to lead this thing, and I'm getting tired here. Somebody else, it's your turn, and then the pace lagged just enough. And when I saw that lag, and all of a sudden the the pack accordions back in, and Kenneth was on the outside. I went, oof, this is going to work out really well, because what we wanted, we knew he's got a great finishing kick. We just wanted him to have a chance to use that. I thought if it goes out super fast, like world record pace or sub 8 minute pace, then maybe he would be able to utilize that to pick off a lot of the debris and work himself into a top 6 position. But when it accordion back like that, then all of a sudden he's right there. And at the bell, he's on the outside of lane 1 and looked really good going over the barrier, which all of a sudden put him in first. And he said, okay, let's go.
Yeah, that was crazy. Seeing him come over the barrier there was just like...
That's where we all got excited, because it wasn't just, okay, he's going to be in there and battle. It was like, oh my gosh, he's in the lead. Oh my gosh, he's gapped the field. Oh my gosh, how are they going to respond? And they all responded well. Yeah. Let's finish up the race, I guess. At that point in time, I'm standing on about the 100 meter to go mark, so I'm seeing it across the track. I see the gap. I'm looking up and going, is that Kenny? That's and at that point, you're just going, okay, we're all in. This is a poker game. You are all in at that point in time. And obviously, he's got a good finishing kick, but so does the world record holder, so does El Bakali, so does the 3 Kenyans that are in the field. But I think that whatever inspired that move when he did go gave us the best case scenario for a positive outcome, because in so doing, gap the field, and then suddenly we have 3 Ethiopians, 3 Kenyans, and El Bakali, and a couple Tunisians, and a group of guys that are right there that all realize we've just been gapped by this upstart American. We got to do something about it. So if you watch them on that back stretch as they lead into the third to the last barrier, they are actually, Girma actually has to push El Bakali out a little to give him some space. And they're going all out at that point in time. And I think that's what ultimately led to Girma, I think, catching his trail leg knee, which just took him down, because at that point in time they're on a dead out sprint, and if you catch a knee going that fast, boom, you're down. And in the process, it probably caused a couple of other Kenyans to have to jump over that mess, and suddenly now we're down to 3, and he's got a medal as long as he as long as he finishes,
as long as he keeps running.
That's where things got really exciting. And El Bakali obviously had a gear there at the end, kind of cut in on him as they came off the water jump. I thought Kenneth had a great last water jump. El Bakali came around, pinched him a little bit as they came in. I wasn't happy about that, but he kept his form really well. El Bakali kind of chopped going in that last barrier, so even though he had been passed, I went, maybe Kenneth can come back on him. But at that point in time, Bakali's clear. Then the Kenyan comes up on his shoulder, and I'm going, let's not, just battle. And he did. That's where we saw his real true grit and emotion come through, boom, to battle for that silver. He was not content for that bronze. And I think that's what a lot of people, to a man and woman, the people who talked to me after were just saying that was such a, well, I'll use the word gutsy, but that wasn't the word that a lot of people were using. That was such a gutsy move for Kenneth with 300 meters to go. But I think ultimately it led to his, I was just as impressed with the gutsy determination he showed in the last 60 meters, in not just saying, hey, this is great, I'm going to go home with a bronze medal. He wanted that silver. He battled for it. So obviously cool. Very cool day at the track that day.
Yeah. How did you feel? Because you are probably one of the best people to know how much work goes into being able to medal at the Olympics, how much work goes into preparing for the Olympics, because, I mean, you experienced that yourself. And then also you've been coaching Kenneth. How did that make you feel for him?
Well, just super, super excited. And obviously, I didn't ever experience an Olympic medal as an athlete. But he's a great talent, and we haven't seen the last of his what he's going to do. He's only 24 years old. We have another Olympic cycle ahead of us, and there's going to be some. We are celebrating and enjoying this without thinking too much ahead. But the time will come when we'll be focused again, and there'll be other goals out there, and people are already, sometimes they'll put the goals out there for you. Well, are you going to be the first one to break 8 minutes or whatever? And I think he has the talent and the skill to do that. He's run 8:06 now, and he did that off of a fast finish sort of thing. And anytime you negative split that much, or at least fast finish the last 400, I think he ran about 57 point for the last 400 over barriers at the end of a steeplechase. So anytime you finish that well and that strong, then certainly evening things out a little bit and still having a little bit of a kick at the end, I think that's a possibility out there, and we'll work towards that. Just as we, in practice, we were working trying to hit 64s and 65s, which would be about 8:07 pace, and he got where that was manageable for him. Our next builds will probably step it down a little bit, and I think in the right race, I think this go round, had he been in the right race at the right or a different race at a different time, I think, that 8:06, even though that was at the time about a 9-second PR, I think he could have had it in him this year under the right circumstances, and I think next year there's no reason to believe that he can't run faster than what he did this year.
Kind of going back to what you were talking about before, learning from kind of the steeplechase guru, you called him, at Weber State. You'd mentioned that there were some key drills and workouts for steeplechase. I don't want you to give away any trade secrets, but what do you feel like were kind of some pillars in Kenneth's steeplechase build that really helped him prepare for this?
We had a nice indoor season for him, and it's interesting because he won USA's last year in that dramatic fashion when he fell and then got up and was patient, got himself back in, and then ended up winning and qualifying for the World Championships. And that came on the heels of him winning the NCAA championship in a pretty dominant fashion. And then he won USA's a few weeks later after falling, and then went on to the World Championships, made the final, and then ended up 10th in the World Championships. So those were all good stepping stones for him. And then he could have easily gone pro at that point in time because there were some shoe companies that were offering him some nice incentive to do so. Ultimately, that wasn't that important to him. He had some schooling left, and he also wanted to finish up with his cross country team. And and so he, against my my suggestions or recommendations, he said, no, I want to come back for this cross-country season. And so I think that cross-country season, though, the build that he did, the endurance that he developed, and the fact that he became a better cross-country runner than he had ever been this last fall, led to him doing good things on the track. And so I think it started with just that nice aerobic build development, the strength that comes from running on hills and on grass and competing with your cross-country mates, and ultimately it helped us garner a third place at the national championships, which was really cool. That would not have happened without him being a team guy and saying, I want to come back. And then at that point, then I think having won the NCAAs and done some great things there, then it was easier for him to say, yeah. And at that point in time, I think the monies had opened up a little bit, and he was able to sign with Nike and for a very, I thought, competitive and fair rate for that time. And so he at that time moved into the professional arena, but still did some of the same things that we would have done with him had he been around for his last year of college running, running some of the indoors, not as big of an indoor schedule, but running a few indoor meets in which he took his fitness from cross country, his aerobic fitness from cross country season, which led into him running I think it was 7:42, 7:43 for open 3,000 meters, which was a good 10-second PR or so in that, which I think then gave him the confidence of now that with a new, better, certainly national class time in the 3,000 meters, then it gave him confidence that, okay, once we get and start going over the barriers now, and he's a very good technician, very good hurdler. There's not many Americans out there or I don't know how many people on the world scene are actually better distance hurdlers than what he is. And so with that new PR in the Open 3000, I think it gave us confidence to go to say, well, yeah, if we run Chick Hislop at Weber State used to say, if you're a really good distance hurdler, then you take your PR in 3,000 meters and add 20 seconds, and that's what the differential will be. Now, I think 20 seconds is you'd have to be really, really good. But if you're 25 seconds, if you're a very good technician, is in that range. And, you add 20 seconds onto 743, that's 53, that's 03, that's 803, right? So I guess, maybe it was Chick was right. And so I think, the cross-country season led to a nice PR in indoor 3,000 meters. And then as we transitioned to outdoor season, then he was able to build on that. He had a few little injuries that came along the way. And part of that, part of being a world-class runner is doing hard workouts and managing injuries and keeping injuries from blowing up to be major speed bumps. And I think we were able to do that by we didn't race every race that we thought we were going to do on this build. We had to take some races off, and he missed a week here or 3 days here, and we had to cross train and whatnot. So it wasn't perfect, but at the end of the day, it probably was perfect because he had a lot of gas there in the tank at the right time once we got to Paris. So it was just determination on his part, not letting little hiccups get in the way or hurt his psyche, and then just belief that it was possible, because we all believed once we got in that final that even if they ran whatever race they could run, he could run in the 806 range. I think I'm on print saying before we went to the games that I thought he was capable of running 806, and it's played out that way, and it was almost good enough for the gold medal, but a close second.
Yeah, that's very cool. It sounds like it was just like seasons worth of fitness, building confidence, being patient, and like all just perfect storm, right time led to
coming together. And then a great, sometimes a lot of times you diagram a race plan, but then other people have to get in line for that race to play out the way it did. That race could have played out a lot of ways, a lot of different ways, but all you can do is you take your strengths and you take your fitness, and then you come up with a plan that at the end of the day will hopefully get you running the fastest, and I think the fastest possible outcome for Kenneth on that day would have been to kind of run it like we did and mapped out. Now, it could have turned out differently had the pace not lagged a little after the first 2/3, then it would have gotten interesting. But I still think he would have been able to continue, and I think he would have been in a good position given his fitness.
So maybe we shift now to, because we kind of chatted about James and Kenneth and their build up to the Olympics and the experience there. Maybe we shift back to Conner and Clayton. You talked a little bit about the trials. You talked about them doing all of their builds together leading up to the Olympics. First, what is the dynamic between those two that you think makes them so successful? They both seem like in the series, they both seem to respond to the program very well, but in different ways. So what about them training together is so
Yeah,
awesome.
I mean, I've talked to a number of people, and they're just going, well, do they have to run every race together? Are they a permanent? And that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to, is when we can do builds and still build together, but then have different spring marathons, different fall marathons. But really, once we were locked into Chicago of last year, then our best case scenario was going to be that they would run at least 3 and probably 4 marathons together, because the Chicago and hitting the A standard there allowed them to go to the Olympic trials, and obviously they needed to finish in the top 2 there, which they did. Having done so, then that puts them on the Olympic track, which it's going to be on the same day. And then once they finished well in the Olympics, and that opened up opportunities maybe to have to race domestically at New York. Chicago would have been too quick of a turnaround. So it really, and usually if you're an American coming off a solid performance at the Olympic Games, then New York's going to be your better option. Plus the fact that New York's a championship style marathon where it's not rabbited. It's not going to be 1 and 2:02, 2:01. It's going to be more of a championship style where it's not paced, and you're going to have the hills, and it's just not as fast a course. And so I think that's better for them right now as well. So when you put all those things together, then it meant that they were going to be joined to the hip for 4 marathons. And we're fortunate that it has been 4, because at any step along the way, had one of them not run well at Chicago or the trials or the games, then they probably wouldn't be doing this 4th one together. So that's great. And then, in the future, we'll see, what it leads to. I'm sure there will be other marathons in the future where they will run together. At the very least, the Olympic trials in 2028, they'll be running together again. But yeah, we'll get them on some different courses, but there'll still be courses in the spring and fall, which means they'll still be training together for the future, as long as things go well, as long as they decide they want to continue in the group.